I wired her everything I had $42,000. I believed we were building a life. But she was already married. And I wasn't even the only one sending money. This is the part nobody warns you about. I'm staring at my laptop screen at 10:30 on a Tuesday night, and there she is, Kalina, brushing her long black hair away from her face while she laughs at something I just said. The video quality is terrible, all pixelated and choppy, but I can see her smile clearly enough. "Graham, you are so funny," she says, and her accent makes everything sound musical. "I never meet someone like you before." I lean back in my chair and feel something I haven't felt in months, genuine happiness. My flat in South London is quiet, except for the hum of the radiator and the distant sound of traffic on the A23. I've got the curtains drawn, a cup of tea going cold beside me, and for the first time since my divorce finalized 8 months ago, I don't feel completely alone. "Did you get the package?" I ask her, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. She nods and holds up a small jewelry box. "You didn't have to do this, Graham. Is too much." But she's smiling when she says it, and I watch her open the box carefully. Inside is a silver necklace, with her name engraved in cursive script, Kalina. Nothing fancy, but I thought it would mean something. "Oh my God," she whispers, and I swear I can see tears in her eyes. Nobody ever give me something with my name before. Nobody ever treat me like I matter. The way she says it makes my chest tight. I want to reach through the screen and hold her. "You do matter," I tell her, and I mean it. "You matter to me." She looks directly into the camera, and for a moment the connection feels crystal clear. "Graham, you make me feel like real woman. Not like problem. Not like burden. You make me feel beautiful." I don't know what to say to that, so I just smile. At 58, after 23 years of marriage that ended with lawyers and cold silences, I thought I was done with all this. I thought I was too old, too set in my ways, too damaged from the divorce to ever feel this kind of connection again. But here's this 27-year-old woman in Manila, 8,000 miles away, making me feel like I'm 25 again. "Tell me about your day," I say, because I want to hear her voice. Want to pretend we're sitting in the same room instead of separated by half the planet. She launches into a story about her work. She's trying to start a visa consultancy business, helping Filipinos navigate the paperwork for overseas work, and I find myself hanging on every word. Not because the story is particularly interesting, but because she's telling it to me. Because she chose to spend her evening talking to me instead of doing whatever 27-year-olds in Manila do on Tuesday nights. "My dream is to have my own office," she says, leaning closer to the camera. "Maybe small one, but mine. Help people like my brother who want to work in Singapore, or my cousin who want to study in Australia. Filipino people, we work so hard, but the process is so complicated. I want to make it easier." The passion in her voice when she talks about her future plans is infectious. I find myself nodding along, imagining her behind a desk in a small office somewhere in Manila, helping families navigate bureaucracy and chase their dreams. "That sounds incredible," I tell her. "You'd be amazing at that." And I believe it. In the 6 weeks we've been talking, she's shown me a kind of intelligence and determination that reminds me why I was attracted to ambitious people in the first place. My ex-wife used to have that same fire, back when we first met, before years of routine and disappointment wore it down to nothing. "Maybe someday," Kalina says with a small shrug. "Need money first. Need office space, computer, all the legal things. Is expensive in Manila." She's not asking me for anything. She never asks me for anything, but something about the way she says it makes me want to help. Makes me want to be part of making her dreams come true. "Well," I say, leaning forward, "maybe when I visit, we can talk about it. Maybe I can help somehow." Her face lights up, and I feel that same warm feeling in my chest. "You really want to visit me?" she asks. And there's something vulnerable in her voice that makes me want to promise her everything. "Of course I do," I tell her. "I want to see you. I want to meet you properly. I want to see your world." She's quiet for a moment, looking down at the necklace still in her hands. When she looks back up, her expression is soft and serious. "Graham, I need to tell you something. I never feel this way before. About any man. You make me feel safe. You make me feel like maybe I can trust someone." The honesty in her voice catches me off guard. I've spent the last 8 months convincing myself that I was fine alone, that I didn't need anyone, that I was better off without the complications of relationships. But sitting here, Looking at her face on my screen, I realize how much I've been lying to myself. I feel the same way, I admit, and it's true. I didn't think this was possible anymore. I thought I was done with all of this. She smiles, and it's the kind of smile that makes you forget about everything else. We not done, Graham. We just starting. The way she says it makes me believe her. Makes me believe that maybe, at 58, after everything I've been through, I can still have a second chance at happiness. Maybe this strange, impossible connection with a woman I've never met in person is exactly what I need. We talk for another hour about everything and nothing: her favorite foods, my retirement plans, the weather in London versus Manila, her family, my work history, normal things that feel extraordinary because we're sharing them with each other. When we finally say goodbye, I sit in my empty flat for a long time afterward, just thinking. For the first time in months, I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Not because anything in my routine will change, but because I know I'll get to talk to her again. Because I know that somewhere in Manila, there's someone who cares about my day, who wants to hear my voice, who makes me feel like I matter. That's worth everything to me. I first found Kalina 3 months ago through a language learning app. I know how that sounds: middle-aged divorcee meets young woman online, but it wasn't like that. Not at first. I'd been planning this retirement trip to Southeast Asia, something I'd always wanted to do but never could, because Margaret thought it was too hot, too crowded, too far from home. Now that I was finally free to go wherever I wanted, the Philippines kept coming up in travel forums as an affordable place where English was widely spoken. I thought learning some basic Tagalog might be polite, maybe help me navigate markets and restaurants without looking like a complete tourist. The app paired you with native speakers who wanted to practice English in exchange for teaching their language. Most of the people who responded to my profile were students or young professionals looking to improve their business English. Kalina was different. "Hello, Graham," her first message read. "I see you want to learn Tagalog for travel. I can help you, but I'm also curious about your country. I never talked to someone from London before. Maybe we can exchange stories, not just words." Something about that message made me smile. It wasn't the usual formal language exchange greeting. It felt personal. Our first conversation lasted 3 hours. We started with basic Tagalog phrases: "Kumusta ka?" meaning "how are you?" and "salamat" for thank you, but somehow we ended up talking about everything else. She told me about growing up in a small province outside Manila, how her family sent her to the city for university, how she'd studied business administration but couldn't find steady work. I told her about my 23 years maintaining hospital equipment, how I'd taken early retirement after the divorce, how London felt too big and too empty at the same time. "Why your wife leave you?" she asked during our second call, with the kind of directness that would have offended me coming from anyone else. But the way she said it wasn't judgmental or prying. It was like she genuinely wanted to understand. She didn't leave me. I corrected. We left each other. Slowly, over about 5 years. I found myself telling her things I'd never said out loud before. How Margaret and I had stopped talking about anything that mattered. How we'd become roommates instead of partners. How the divorce felt less like an ending and more like acknowledging something that had died years earlier. "That must be very lonely," Kalina said, and the sympathy in her voice was so genuine it made my throat tight. Being with someone who doesn't see you anymore. She understood it perfectly, better than my own friends who'd spent months telling me I was better off, that I'd find someone else, that 58 wasn't too old to start over. Kalina didn't offer platitudes. She just listened, and somehow that meant everything. I started looking forward to our conversations more than anything else in my day. My retirement routine had become depressingly predictable: breakfast, newspaper, maybe a walk to the shops, afternoon television, dinner alone, early bed. But every evening at 9, London time, I'd open my laptop and there she'd be, usually sitting at a small desk in what looked like a studio apartment. She'd ask about my day with genuine interest, share stories about her own life, teach me new phrases that I'd practiced badly while she laughed encouragingly. "You have patient teacher," I told her one evening, after butchering the pronunciation of Maligayang peg dating for the 10th time. "You have eager student," she replied. "I like teaching you. You make me feel useful." There was something in the way she said it that made me pause. "Don't you feel useful at your work?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "I don't have regular work right now. I do some freelance admin, but is not steady." is not what I want to do with my life. That's when she first told me about her dream of starting a visa consultancy. I see so many Filipino families struggle with paperwork for overseas work, she explained. My brother, he want to work construction in Dubai, but application process is so confusing. My cousin, she want to study nursing in Canada, but don't know how to apply for student visa. I help them, and I think maybe I can help other people too. Maybe make it into real business. The way her voice changed when she talked about it became more animated, more confident, made me want to support her somehow. That's a brilliant idea, I told her. You clearly understand the system, and you care about helping people. That's exactly what people need. She smiled, but it was a sad smile. Is just dream right now. Need money for office rent, computer, legal registration, all the government fees. Maybe someday. She never asked me for help directly. Never even hinted that I should offer. That's what made me want to help her more. Over the following weeks, our conversations became the highlight of my day. She'd tell me about her life in Manila, the noise and chaos of the streets, the tiny apartment she shared with 2 roommates, the family gatherings where everyone talked over each other and ate with their hands. I'd tell her about London, the grey skies and polite queues, the pub on my corner where I'd started going for Sunday lunch, the strange silence of my flat after decades of sharing space with someone else. You sound lonely, she said one evening. And it wasn't a question. I am lonely, I admitted. I thought I wanted to be alone after the divorce. But turns out there's a difference between being alone by choice and being alone because you don't know how to connect with people anymore. She was quiet for a moment. I understand that feeling. Is different kind of lonely when you in big city where nobody really know you. But Graham, you easy to talk to. You good listener. You just need to find right person to listen to. That night, after we said goodbye, I realized I hadn't felt lonely while we were talking. For 2 hours, I'd felt engaged, interested, cared for. This woman 8,000 miles away was giving me something I hadn't even realized I was missing. And from the way she smiled when she saw me log on each evening, I thought maybe I was giving her something too. Maybe this was what connection actually felt like, not the comfortable routine I'd mistaken for love during my marriage, but this electric feeling of being genuinely seen and appreciated by another person. I started sending her small gifts. Nothing expensive at first, a postcard from London, some Earl Grey tea, a small Union Jack pin. She'd get so excited about each package, taking photos to show me how she'd displayed the postcard on her desk or how she'd made the tea properly. You don't have to send me things, she'd say, but she was always smiling when she said it. I want to, I'd tell her, I like making you happy. And it was true. Making her smile had become the best part of my day. I love you, Graham. She said it quietly, almost like she was afraid I wouldn't hear her, during a video call on a rainy Thursday evening in November. I'd been telling her about my day, mundane stuff about grocery shopping and fixing a leaky tap, when she went quiet and just looked at me through the screen with an expression I'd never seen before. Soft and vulnerable and completely serious. I love you too, I said without hesitation, because I'd been feeling it for weeks but hadn't known how to say it first. The smile that spread across her face made my chest feel tight with happiness. I never say that to any man before, she told me, leaning closer to the camera. I never feel this way before. You make me feel like I can be myself, like I don't have to pretend to be someone else. I wanted to reach through the screen and hold her. Instead, I just sat there in my flat, looking at this beautiful woman who was telling me she loved me, and tried to process the fact that at 58 years old, I was falling in love again. Real love. Not the comfortable companionship I'd had with Margaret, but the kind of love that makes you want to be a better person. Our conversations after that took on a different quality. We started talking about the future, not just my visit to Manila, but real future plans. When you come here, I show you everything, she'd say, her eyes bright with excitement. I take you to see sunset at Manila Bay, we eat at the market where my family go, I introduce you to my cousins. They will love you. The way she talked about introducing me to her family made it feel real, made it feel like I wasn't just some foreign man she was chatting with online, but someone who could actually become part of her world. And maybe after your visit, she said one evening, her voice softer than usual, maybe we can think about future together, real future. She looked down at her hands for a moment, then back at the camera. I know it's crazy we never meet in person, but Graham, I feel like I know you better than people I see every day. I feel like you understand me, like you see who I really am inside. I felt exactly the same way. In 3 months of talking to her, I'd shared more of myself than I had with Margaret in the last 5 years of our marriage. What kind of future are you thinking about? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual even though my heart was racing. She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made me forget about everything else. Maybe we live together. Maybe you move here, or I come to London, or we find new place together. Maybe we have small house with garden where I can grow vegetables like my mother do. Maybe. She paused, looking almost shy. Maybe we have baby. I know I'm 27 and you 58, but my grandmother, she have baby when she 45 with man who's 63. Love doesn't have age limit. The thought of having a child at my age should have terrified me. Instead, it filled me with a warmth I hadn't expected. I tried to imagine teaching a little boy or girl to ride a bicycle, reading bedtime stories, having someone call me Papa in Kalina's musical accent. I'd like that, I told her honestly. All of it. I'd like to build something real with you. She put her hand over her heart and mouthed, I love you at the camera, and I felt more connected to another human being than I had in years. Between our evening calls, she'd send me photos throughout her day. Nothing inappropriate. Kalina was always modest, always proper, but little glimpses of her world that made me feel included. A picture of her morning coffee with the message, Good morning, my love, thinking of you. A selfie outside a church with just light candle for us, pray that everything work out good. A photo of a new dress she'd bought, simple and elegant with, what you think. Want to look beautiful for my gram. Each message felt like a small gift. A reminder that someone on the other side of the world was thinking about me, caring about my opinion, wanting to share her life with me. I started sending her money not because she asked, but because I wanted to help make her dreams possible. I want to help you start your business, I told her during one of our calls. You shouldn't have to wait for someday. Let me invest in your future. In our future. Her eyes filled with tears. Graham, I cannot take your money. Is too much. But I insisted. It's not charity, Kalina, it's partnership. I believe in you, and I believe in us. Let me help. I sent her £2,000 that first time, money from my redundancy payment that was just sitting in my savings account earning nothing. She used the money to register her business officially and rent a small office space. She sent me photos of everything, the official documents with C.M. Santos Visa Consultancy, printed in formal letters, the tiny office with just a desk and chair but windows that looked out onto a busy Manila street, herself sitting behind the desk wearing a professional blouse and the biggest smile I'd ever seen. Look, Graham, you make my dream come true. Our dream come true. She was so proud, so excited, so grateful. Making her happy made me happier than I'd been in years. My family want to meet you, she told me a few weeks later. I tell them about you, about how you help me, about how we plan future together. My mother say any man who help her daughter follow her dreams must be good man. The approval in her voice when she talked about her family's reaction made me feel like I was already part of something bigger than just the two of us. Like I belonged somewhere again. When Typhoon Odette hit her family's province in December, damaging her parents' house and flooding her brother's small business, I didn't hesitate to send another £5,000. My family, they lose everything in the storm, she told me through tears during our video call. The roof of my parents' house is gone. My brother's sorry store, all the inventory is destroyed. They don't have insurance, they don't have savings. I don't know how they will rebuild. I transferred the money that same night. Tell them it's from their future son-in-law, I said, and watching her face light up through her tears made every penny worth it. She sent me videos of the repairs her father and uncles fixing the roof, her mother hanging new curtains in their bedroom, her brother restocking his small store with rice and canned goods and household supplies. Graham, my family say you are angel, she told me. They say I am so lucky to find man who care about my family like they his own family. I felt proud in a way I hadn't felt since I was young, like I was making a real difference in people's lives, like I was needed and appreciated and loved. I promise you, Graham, she said during one of our late-night calls, her voice serious and full of emotion, I will make you happy for rest of your life. I will take care of you, love you, give you family you deserve. You saved my family, You make my dreams possible. You show me what real love feel like. I will never forget that. I will never let you down." The sincerity in her voice, the tears in her eyes, the way she looked directly into the camera when she made that promise, it felt like a sacred vow. Like we were getting married right there through the screen, 8,000 miles apart. I started planning my trip to Manila. Not just a vacation, but a real visit to meet the woman I was going to spend my life with, to see the business I'd helped her start, to meet the family I'd helped rebuild. This time next year, I told her, we'll be together for real. No more video calls, no more time zones, no more distance, just us. She smiled and nodded, wiping away happy tears. "I cannot wait, my love. I cannot wait to hold you, to show you my world, to start our real life together." For the first time since my divorce, I had something to look forward to, someone to build a future with, someone who loved me enough to promise me forever. The first time Kalina missed one of our regular calls, I told myself not to worry. It was a Tuesday evening, our usual 9 o'clock London time slot, and I sat at my laptop for 20 minutes waiting for her to log on. Nothing. I sent her a message asking if everything was okay, then went to bed feeling unsettled but trying to be reasonable. People have emergencies. Technology fails. Life happens. "Sorry, my love." She messaged me the next morning. "Battery on my phone died and power was out in my building all night. You know how it is in Manila? Power grid not so reliable like in London." It seemed plausible. I'd read about infrastructure problems in developing countries. But something about the explanation felt off, not wrong exactly, just too smooth, too ready, like she'd prepared it in advance. Our next few calls went normally, but I started noticing small inconsistencies. She'd mentioned being at her office on days when she'd previously told me she was visiting family in the province. She'd described business meetings that seemed to contradict her earlier schedule. When I asked casual questions about the details, she'd deflect or change the subject. "You ask so many questions, Graham. You don't trust me." The hurt in her voice made me feel guilty for being suspicious. "Of course I trust you," I'd tell her. "I'm just interested in your life. I want to know about your day." But doubt had planted itself in my mind, growing quietly in the spaces between her words. I started paying closer attention to the invoices she'd send me from her business expenses, rent receipts, supply purchases, government fees. The formatting looked identical across different vendors. The fonts were the same. Even the paper quality in the photos looked uniform, like they'd all been printed on the same printer. "These receipts look very professional," I said during one call, trying to sound casual. "All your vendors use the same system." She glanced away from the camera for a split second, just long enough for me to notice. "Yes, is common software here for small business. Makes everything standard." Her explanation was reasonable, but the way she delivered it felt rehearsed, like she'd anticipated the question. I told myself I was being paranoid. The divorce had made me suspicious of everyone, seeing deception where none existed. Kalina had been nothing but loving and honest with me. She'd shared her family, her dreams, her struggles. She'd never directly asked me for money. I'd offered it because I wanted to help. I pushed the doubts aside and focused on planning my visit to Manila. Then she started missing more calls. "My uncle in the hospital. I have to visit him every night this week." A week later, government inspection of my office. Very stressful. I need to prepare all documents. 2 weeks after that, my cousin having problem with her husband. She's staying with me and crying all the time. I cannot talk on video. Each excuse was reasonable, but together they formed a pattern that made my stomach clench with worry. "Is everything really okay?" I asked during one of our brief conversations. "You seem stressed lately, distant." She looked directly into the camera with an expression I couldn't read. "Graham, why you always think something is wrong? I tell you what's happening in my life, but you act like you don't believe me." That hurt my feelings. The accusation stung because part of me did doubt her, and I hated myself for it. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I don't mean to sound suspicious. I just miss our long talks. I miss feeling close to you." Her expression softened. "I miss that too, my love. It's just difficult time right now. Many things happening at once. But I love you. Nothing changed that." She blew me a kiss through the screen, and I wanted to believe her so badly that I convinced myself I was creating problems where none existed. When her cousin supposedly ended up in the hospital after a motorcycle accident, I offered to send money for medical expenses without being asked. Maybe 3,000 would help with hospital bills? Kalina's face lit up with relief and gratitude. Graham, you are so good to me, to my family. We will pay you back when things get better. But she never mentioned specific details about the accident, never showed me photos from the hospital, never gave me updates on her cousin's recovery. When I asked about it weeks later, she seemed confused for a moment before remembering. Oh yes, she much better now. Back to work already. I started losing sleep. Not because I was angry, but because I was scared. Scared that the best thing that had happened to me in years was built on lies. Scared that the love I felt was one-sided. Scared that I was being taken for a fool by someone I'd trusted completely. During our calls, I'd watch her face carefully, looking for tells, analyzing her expressions, trying to catch her in contradictions. It was exhausting and heartbreaking, and I hated myself for doing it. You seem different lately, she said during one call. More serious, less happy. Are you okay? I wanted to tell her about my doubts, wanted to ask her direct questions about the inconsistencies I'd noticed, wanted to clear the air and get back to the easy intimacy we'd shared. Instead, I just smiled and told her I was fine. Just work stress. I lied, because confronting her felt more terrifying than living with uncertainty. The final straw came when she went completely silent for 2 days. No messages, no calls, no responses to my increasingly worried texts. I imagined accidents, emergencies, disasters. I considered calling hospitals in Manila, though I had no idea how to even begin such a search. On the 3rd day, she finally called me, tears streaming down her face. Graham, I so sorry I disappear. Is terrible thing happened to my family. Her voice was shaky, broken. My little nephew, he very sick. My sister bring him to hospital, but they say need expensive medicine. Everyone in family trying to find money, but we don't have enough. I been at hospital 3 days, sleeping in chair, praying he get better. The desperation in her voice, the tears, the raw emotion, it felt completely real. All my doubts evaporated in the face of a family emergency. How much do you need? I asked immediately. Whatever it costs, I'll send it right now. She told me £3,000 would cover the medication and hospital stay. I transferred the money within an hour, feeling guilty for ever suspecting her of deception. Thank you, Graham. You saved my nephew's life. My family will never forget this kindness. She was crying harder now, tears of relief and gratitude that made me feel like the most important person in the world. But later that night, lying alone in my bed, staring at the ceiling in the dark, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Not with her story that had seemed genuine, but with the whole situation. The pattern of emergencies, the convenient crises that required exactly the amount of money I was comfortable sending, the way she disappeared completely instead of sending even a quick message explaining her absence. I tried to push the thoughts away, but they lingered like a low-grade fever, making everything feel slightly off balance. I started keeping track of the money I'd sent her. $2,000 for her business, $5,000 for the typhoon damage, $3,000 for her cousin's accident, $3,000 for her nephew's medical bills, £13,000 in 6 months, more than I'd spent on myself in the past 2 years. Not a fortune, but not pocket change either. Money that was supposed to be building our future together, investing in our shared dreams. I told myself it was worth it, that love required sacrifice, that helping her family was helping our family. But the doubt had taken root, and no amount of rationalization could make it go away completely. I landed at Ninoy Aquino International Airport on a steamy February morning, after 22 hours of travel, my shirt already sticking to my back from the humidity before I'd even cleared customs. The chaos of Manila hit me immediately, the noise, the crowds, the smell of exhaust and fried food, and something else I couldn't identify. I'd never been anywhere like it. After the quiet orderliness of London, it felt like stepping into a different world entirely. Kalina was waiting for me at arrivals, holding a small sign with my name written in careful letters. She looked smaller than I'd expected, more fragile somehow, wearing a simple blue dress and sandals. When she saw me, her face broke into the smile I'd been seeing on my laptop screen for months, but now it was real, three-dimensional, right in front of me. Graham, she called out, waving the sign. I dropped my luggage and walked toward her, my heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. Hello, my love, she said softly when I reached her, but she didn't move to hug me. There was a shyness about her that surprised me. On video calls, she'd been confident and expressive. In person, she seemed almost careful. "Hello, beautiful," I said, reaching for her hand. She let me take it briefly, then gently pulled away. "It's very public here," she explained. "Filipino culture, we not so affectionate in public places. My family, they are conservative people." The taxi ride to my hotel took 2 hours through traffic that defied logic. Kalina sat beside me, pointing out landmarks and explaining the history of different neighborhoods, but she maintained a careful distance between us on the seat. I'd imagined this moment for months, finally being in the same physical space as the woman I loved, but it felt different than I'd expected. More awkward, less natural. "Are you okay?" I asked her at one point. "You seem nervous." She smiled and nodded. "It's just strange, you know. Seeing you here, in my city, good strange, but strange." She'd booked me a room at a mid-range hotel in Makati, the business district. "I picked this place because it's a safe area for foreigners," she explained, as we pulled up to the modern building, "and is close to good restaurants where we can eat together." I'd hoped she might stay with me, had imagined us finally being able to hold each other properly after months of separation, but she made it clear that wouldn't be happening. "I cannot stay overnight, my family would not understand, but I come visit you every evening after work, and we spend whole days together on weekend." That first evening, she came to my hotel room around 9 o'clock, the same time we used to have our video calls. She'd changed into jeans and a t-shirt, looking younger and more relaxed than she had at the airport. "Now we can talk properly," she said, settling into the chair by the window while I sat on the bed. "How do you like Manila so far?" We talked for 2 hours, and slowly the woman I'd fallen in love with online emerged. She laughed at my stories about the taxi ride, told me about her day at the office, shared her plans for showing me around the city. "Tomorrow I take you to Intramuros, the old Spanish part of the city," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "Then we go to my favorite restaurant for lunch. You try real Filipino food, not tourist food. And maybe if you want, we can go shopping for gifts for my family. They want to meet you so much." The enthusiasm in her voice when she talked about introducing me to her world made me feel better about the awkwardness earlier. Maybe she just needed time to get comfortable with me being here. When she leaned over to kiss me goodnight, a soft, quick kiss on the lips, it felt like the first real moment of connection since I'd arrived. "I'm so happy you here, Graham," she whispered. "I know it's different than video call, but we learn how to be together in person. We have whole week." I watched her gather her purse and head for the door, already missing her before she'd even left. The next few days fell into a pattern. Kalina would arrive at my hotel mid-morning, and we'd spend the day exploring Manila together. She was an enthusiastic tour guide, showing me markets and museums and churches, introducing me to foods I'd never heard of, helping me navigate the controlled chaos of the city. But something felt off. She was attentive and friendly, but there was a distance I couldn't bridge. When I tried to hold her hand while walking, she'd allow it briefly, then find reasons to let go. When I suggested romantic activities, watching the sunset at Manila Bay, having dinner at a nice restaurant, she'd redirect us toward more casual, public activities. "Is everything all right between us?" I asked her on Wednesday as we sat in a coffee shop in one of the big malls. "You seem different than you do on our video calls. More reserved." She stirred her iced coffee thoughtfully. "It's just hard for me, Graham. This is all new. Having someone visit me, someone who care about me. I never have boyfriend before who come all the way to Philippines to see me. I don't know how to act." Her explanation made sense, but it didn't ease the growing unease I felt. I'd expected our connection to deepen once we were finally in the same place. Instead, it felt like we were getting to know each other all over again, like the intimacy we'd built online didn't translate to physical proximity. I told myself to be patient, that these things took time, that I was probably expecting too much too quickly. On Thursday, I asked to meet her family. "I brought gifts for your parents, for your siblings. I'd love to take them out for dinner, get to know the people who are important to you." Kalina looked uncomfortable for the first time since I'd arrived. "My family, they live in province, is 4 hours drive from Manila. Maybe next time you visit, we can arrange that." But she'd told me months ago that her parents lived in the metro area. I was sure of it. "I thought your mother lived in Quezon City?" I asked carefully. No, she said quickly. "They moved back to province after typhoon. Cheaper to live there." Her explanation felt rushed, like she was making it up as she went along. But what about your brother? Your cousins? You've mentioned them living here in Manila. She fidgeted with her phone. They very busy this week. Work, you know. Maybe we see them before you leave. Every answer raised new questions, but I didn't want to push. I was only here for a week. I didn't want to spend it arguing. On Friday evening, our last night together, I decided to take a risk. Kalina, I want to talk to you about something important. We were in my hotel room, and she was getting ready to leave as usual. I've been thinking about us, about our future. I love you, and I believe you love me too. What would you think about us living together, permanently? I'd been planning this conversation for weeks. I could move here or help you get a visa to come to London, whatever works better for your business, for your family. She sat back down on the edge of the bed, her expression serious. Graham, that make me very happy to hear. I want that too, more than anything. But is complicated. She looked down at her hands. I need to finish some paperwork first. Some legal things for my business, some family obligations. Give me maybe 6 months to sort everything out properly. 6 months felt like forever after flying 8,000 miles to see her, but I tried to be understanding. What kind of paperwork? I asked. Maybe I can help. I've got time, and I want to make this work. She shook her head. Is boring Filipino bureaucracy. Very complicated, you wouldn't understand. But don't worry, I handle everything. Just need a little bit more time. There was something final in her tone that discouraged further questions. Before I left Manila, I gave her another £10,000. I want to help you get that office furniture you mentioned, maybe hire an assistant. I want your business to succeed. Her eyes lit up with the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her all week. Graham, you are so generous. This will make such big difference for my company. She kissed me then, properly, with the passion I'd been hoping to feel all week. For a moment, it felt like we were back to the connection we'd had online. At the airport, saying goodbye was harder than I'd expected. Despite all the awkwardness and confusion of the week, I didn't want to leave her. I didn't want to go back to video calls and time zone calculations. I come back soon. I promised her. Maybe in a few months, once you get your paperwork sorted out. She nodded and hugged me tightly. I love you, Graham. Thank you for coming to see me. Thank you for everything you do for me, for my family. Standing there in the departure lounge, watching her wave goodbye through the glass, I told myself that the distance and cultural differences had made things difficult, but that we'd work it out. On the plane back to London, I spent hours analyzing every conversation, every moment, every expression on her face during the week. Something had felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. Maybe it was the natural awkwardness of meeting someone in person after months of online relationship. Maybe she was just shy, conservative, careful about moving too fast physically. Maybe I'd expected too much and needed to be more patient. But as the plane flew west, away from Manila and back toward my quiet life in London, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd missed something important. That there were conversations happening beneath the conversations we'd actually had. That the woman I'd met in person wasn't quite the same as the woman I'd fallen in love with through a screen. I told myself I was overthinking things, that love was always more complicated in reality than in our fantasies. But the doubt that had been growing for months felt heavier now, more insistent, harder to ignore. I'd been back in London for 2 months when the message arrived. It was a Tuesday afternoon in April, and I was checking Facebook, something I rarely did anymore since the divorce, but boredom had driven me to scroll through other people's vacation photos and political arguments. The message request was from someone named Miguel Santos, and the profile picture showed a young Filipino man in what looked like a wedding photo. "Hello, sir," the message began. "I think we need to talk about Kalina. I am her husband." I stared at the words for a full minute, certain I was misreading them. Husband. The word didn't make sense. Kalina had never mentioned being married. She'd told me she'd never even had a serious boyfriend before me. I clicked on Miguel's profile, my hands shaking slightly as I scrolled through his photos. There she was, Kalina, in a white wedding dress, standing next to Miguel in front of what looked like a small church. The date stamp on the photo said December 2019, over 2 years ago, months before I'd even met her online. There were dozens of photos, their engagement party, wedding preparations, honeymoon pictures at a beach resort. Pictures of them with family members I recognized from stories Kalina had told me about her own family. Pictures of them in what was clearly their shared apartment, the same apartment where she'd been sitting during our video calls. This can't be right, I said out loud to my empty flat. There has to be some explanation. But I kept scrolling, and the evidence was overwhelming. Recent photos showed them at Christmas dinner just a few months ago, at birthday parties, at family gatherings. Photos from February, the same month I'd visited Manila, showed them together at what looked like a Valentine's Day celebration. I clicked back to Miguel's message. He'd sent more while I was looking at the photos. I know she'd been talking to you. I know you send her money. You are not the only one, sir. I found messages on her phone from 3 different foreigners, all sending money, all thinking they her boyfriend. My stomach dropped. Not the only one. 3 different foreigners. The words repeated in my head like a mantra. She tell me you visit Manila in February. She say you are client for her visa business, but I see the hotel receipts. I know is not business. I know you think she love you, but sir, she is my wife. We been married 3 years. She do this before, many times. Always foreign men, who lonely, who want Filipino girlfriend. His English was careful but clear, and there was something in his tone, not angry, but tired, resigned, that made it feel authentic. I tried calling Kalina immediately. The number went straight to voicemail. I sent her urgent messages on WhatsApp, on Facebook, on the language app where we'd first met. Kalina, I need to talk to you right away. Please call me. It's important. Nothing. For the first time in 8 months, she was completely unreachable. Miguel sent me more messages over the next few hours. Screenshots of conversations between him and Kalina, where she talked about her clients' men she was helping with visa applications, who were also helping her financially. Bank statements showing money transfers from multiple Western Union locations around Manila. Photos of purchases she'd made with the money I'd sent her, not business equipment or family emergency funds, but designer handbags, jewelry, expensive dinners out. She good at making men feel special, Miguel wrote. She study your social media, learn what you want to hear, become perfect woman for you. With American man, she is sweet and innocent. With British man like you, she is proper and modest. With Australian man, she is adventurous and fun. She have different personality for different men. The clinical way he described it made my skin crawl. Why are you telling me this? I finally wrote back. Why now? His response came quickly. Because I tired of lies. I tired of sharing my wife with strangers. And because she pregnant now. Real pregnant, not fake emergency pregnant. She need to choose be real wife to me, or keep playing games with foreign men. I choose to stop pretending I don't know. Pregnant. The word hit me like a physical blow. During our video calls, Kalina had talked dreamily about having children with me someday. Now she was pregnant with her husband's child while taking money from multiple foreign men who thought they were in relationships with her. The level of deception was breathtaking in its complexity and cruelty. I spent the next 3 days trying to reach her through every possible channel. I called the hotel where I'd stayed in Manila, asking them to deliver a message to her. I sent emails to the address she'd given me for her visa consultancy business. I even tried calling numbers she'd mentioned for her supposed family members. Nothing worked. She had vanished completely from my life as suddenly and thoroughly as she'd entered it. On Friday, she finally responded. Not with a call or a long explanation, but with a single text message. Graham, I'm sorry, but this isn't your business anymore. Please don't contact me again. That was it. 8 months of daily conversations, declarations of love, promises of forever, and it ended with one dismissive text message. She blocked me on all platforms immediately afterward. I sat in my flat that evening, staring at my laptop screen, trying to process what had happened. The woman I'd loved, planned a future with, sent £42,000 to over 8 months, had been married the entire time. Not just married, but running the same scam on multiple men simultaneously. Every conversation we'd had, every tear she'd shed, every promise she'd made had been calculated manipulation. The worst part wasn't the money, though £42,000 was more than I'd ever spent on anything except my house. The worst part was feeling like a complete fool. How had I not seen it? How had I been so desperate for connection that I'd ignored every red flag, explained away every inconsistency, believed every lie? I thought about all the times my gut had told me something was wrong, all the moments when her stories hadn't quite added up, all the occasions when I'd chosen to trust her instead of trusting myself. I pulled up our old conversations, reading through months of messages with new eyes. Now I could see the patterns Miguel had described, how she'd carefully crafted her responses to tell me exactly what I wanted to hear, how she'd studied my loneliness and fed it back to me in the form of a perfect fantasy girlfriend. She'd known exactly which emotional buttons to push, exactly how much affection to give and when to pull back, exactly how to make me feel like I was rescuing her instead of being robbed by her. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat at my kitchen table, adding up all the money transfers, all the gifts, all the emergencies, and business investments, and family crises that had cost me £42,000 over 8 months. Money I'd sent willingly, even eagerly, because I'd believed I was building a future with someone who loved me. Money that had actually been funding the lifestyle of a married woman who saw me as nothing more than a particularly generous mark in an elaborate con game. I tried everything I could think of to get answers. I called the hotel in Makati where I'd stayed, asking if they had any contact information for Kalina beyond what I already had. The desk clerk was polite but firm. "Sorry, sir. We cannot give out personal information about guests or their visitors." I tried the visa consultancy business she'd claimed to be running, calling the number she'd given me dozens of times over the following weeks. It either rang endlessly or went to a generic voicemail that was never returned. I even hired a private investigator in Manila, found one through an online directory, and paid him £500 to look into Kalina's background. What he found confirmed everything Miguel had told me. Kalina May Santos, married to Miguel Santos in December 2019, no record of any registered business under her name, no criminal record, but several complaints filed with local police by other foreign men claiming fraud. "This is common scam in Philippines," the investigator wrote in his report. "Young women target lonely foreign men online, usually older men going through divorce or retirement. They very good at this, very professional." I wrote her letters, actual physical letters that I mailed to addresses I found connected to her family. I kept them respectful, not angry, just asking for an explanation. "I'm not trying to cause trouble for you," I wrote in one. "I just need to understand what happened. I need to know if any of it was real." The letters came back marked "Return to sender" or simply disappeared into whatever postal system exists in rural Philippines. I tried reaching out through social media to people who appeared in her photos, cousins, friends, co-workers from whatever jobs she actually had. Most of them ignored my messages completely. One young woman responded briefly, "Sir, please leave Kalina alone. She don't want to talk to you. She have new life now." New life. As if the months we'd spent together had been some kind of previous existence that no longer mattered. The silence was worse than anger would have been. If she'd called me names, told me I was a pathetic old fool, explained how she'd manipulated me, at least that would have been acknowledgement that I'd existed in her life. Instead, I got nothing. Complete erasure. Like I'd never mattered at all, like our entire relationship had been so meaningless to her that it wasn't worth even a basic explanation. 3 months after Miguel's message, I sent Kalina one final email. Not through the channels she'd blocked, but to a work address I'd found through some determined internet searching. I poured everything into that email, not anger or accusations, but honest bewilderment and hurt. "I don't understand why you won't just tell me the truth." I wrote, "I know you're married. I know about the other men. I know it was all fake. I just need to hear it from you. I need closure. Please." 2 days later, I got a response. Not from Kalina, but from someone claiming to be her sister. "Sir, Kalina asked me to tell you stop contacting her family. She say what happened between you was business transaction, nothing personal. She provides service, you pay for service, now business is finished. She don't owe you explanation for her personal life. Please respect her privacy and don't contact again." Business transaction, service provided. That's how she saw our 8 months together, as a commercial exchange, where she'd delivered exactly what she'd promised and I'd been a satisfied customer. The coldness of that phrase hit me harder than any insult could have. I hadn't been her boyfriend, her partner, her future husband. I'd been a client, a source of income, a mark in a long-running confidence game. I stopped trying to contact her after that. Not because I'd gotten the closure I wanted, but because I finally understood that closure wasn't something she was going to give me. It was something I'd have to create for myself. The Kalina I'd fallen in love with, the vulnerable young woman building a business, the devoted daughter helping her family, the romantic dreamer talking about our future together, that person had never existed. She'd been a character, carefully constructed to appeal to exactly the kind of lonely, middle-aged, recently divorced man I was. I spent weeks going through our old conversations, looking for clues I'd missed, trying to figure out when the lies had started. But the truth was that the lies had been there from the beginning. Her age might have been real. Her name might have been real. But everything else, her family situation, her business dreams, her feelings for me, her availability, had been carefully crafted fiction designed to extract money from lonely foreign men. The hardest part wasn't even the money, though £42,000 was more than many people made in a year. The hardest part was accepting that someone could fake intimacy so convincingly. For 8 months, I'd felt genuinely connected to another human being. I'd shared my hopes, my fears, my loneliness, my dreams for the future. I'd believed someone cared about me, understood me, loved me. Learning that all of that had been performance, that my deepest emotions had been nothing more than raw material for someone else's scam, made me question everything I thought I knew about human connection. "I'm sorry, but this isn't your business anymore." That line from her single text message echoed in my head for months. It wasn't just dismissive, it was revealing. My feelings, my investment in our relationship, my need for answers, none of that was my business because it had never been real business to begin with. I'd been operating under the assumption that we were partners in something meaningful. She'd been running a one-woman company where I was inventory, not a stakeholder. The silence stretched on. No birthday message on my 59th birthday, no Christmas greeting, no acknowledgement of any of the important dates we'd shared during our time together. I was completely erased from her life, while she remained vividly present in mine through the absence of answers, through the questions that would never be resolved, through the ghost of a relationship that had never actually existed. It was the most complete and devastating breakup I'd ever experienced, made worse by the fact that there was nothing real to break up. You can't end something that was never real to begin with. You can only wake up from it. 6 months after Miguel's message, I stopped looking for answers from Kalina and started looking for answers from myself. The rage had burned itself out. The hurt had settled into something duller but more persistent. What remained was the hardest question of all: how had I let this happen? How had a reasonably intelligent 58-year-old man, someone who'd managed a successful career and navigated a long marriage, fallen so completely for such an obvious scam? I sat in my flat on a gray Sunday morning in October, drinking tea and staring out at the rain, forcing myself to really examine what had happened. Not what she'd done to me, but what I'd done to myself. Because the truth was, I'd been complicit in my own deception. I'd seen the red flags and chosen to ignore them. I'd felt the inconsistencies and rationalized them away. I'd wanted so badly to believe in the fantasy that I'd helped construct it myself. The loneliness had made me desperate. That was the brutal truth I had to face. After Margaret left, after 23 years of marriage ended in lawyer meetings and awkward silences, I'd been adrift in a way I'd never experienced before. Not just alone, but purposeless. Retirement had been supposed to be freedom, but it had felt more like exile. No work to structure my days, no wife to share meals with, no children to visit or grandchildren to spoil. Just me, in a flat that was too quiet, with days that stretched endlessly and nothing meaningful to fill them. When Kalina appeared in my life, she hadn't just offered companionship, she'd offered significance. She'd made me feel needed again. Not just wanted or liked, but essential to someone else's happiness and success. When she told me about her business dreams, I became the mentor who could make them possible. When she shared her family's struggles, I became the provider who could solve their problems. When she talked about our future together, I became the romantic hero who could rescue her from loneliness and poverty. I'd been so starved for purpose that I'd jumped at the chance to be someone's savior. The money hadn't felt like giving, it had felt like investing in my own relevance. Every transfer, every gift, every emergency fund had reinforced my sense of being important to someone. I wasn't just a retired maintenance supervisor killing time in South London. I was Graham, the man who was changing Kalina's life, building her business, supporting her family, creating a future with a beautiful young woman who appreciated everything I had to offer. The age difference should have been a warning sign, but instead I'd let it feed my ego. At 58, recently divorced and feeling invisible, the attention of a 27-year-old woman had been intoxicating. I'd told myself that maturity and stability were attractive qualities, that younger women in developing countries valued different things than women my age in London. I'd convinced myself that our connection transcended the 31-year gap between us because what we shared was deeper than physical attraction. But if I was honest, really, brutally honest, I knew that wasn't true. I'd fallen for the fantasy of being desired by someone young and beautiful. I'd enjoyed the envy in my friends' voices when I'd mentioned my girlfriend in the Philippines. I'd liked feeling like the kind of man who could attract a woman like Kalina, even if that attraction was only possible because of my bank account and her acting skills. The cultural difference had been another convenient excuse for ignoring warning signs. When her stories didn't add up, I'd told myself it was because I didn't understand Filipino family dynamics. When her behavior seemed inconsistent, I'd blamed it on cultural misunderstandings or language barriers. When she'd kept me away from her family during my visit to Manila, I'd accepted her explanations about conservative traditions and proper introductions. I'd used the distance, physical and cultural, to fill in gaps in my knowledge with my own wishful thinking. When she'd told me about her family's typhoon damage, I'd imagined devastated homes and grateful relatives. When she described her business plans, I'd pictured her in a professional office, helping deserving clients. When she talked about our future together, I'd visualized suburban houses and family dinners and the kind of domestic contentment I'd lost with Margaret. But none of those images had been based on reality. They'd been based on what I'd wanted to believe, projected onto a situation I'd understood only through carefully curated video calls and messages. I'd fallen in love with my own imagination as much as with Kalina herself. She'd provided the raw material, a pretty face, a sympathetic story, carefully timed expressions of affection, but I'd built the actual relationship in my own head. The money had been the most revealing part of the whole experience. I'd sent £42,000 to someone I'd never met in person, for emergencies I'd never verified, to support family members I'd never spoken to, for business ventures I'd never seen. I'd done it not because the requests were reasonable, but because giving made me feel powerful and needed and loved. Each transfer had been like buying another month of feeling important to someone. I'd told myself I was being generous, but really I was being selfish. The money wasn't charity, it was payment for the emotional services Kalina was providing. I was paying her to make me feel young, desirable, needed, and significant. I was paying her to listen to my stories, laugh at my jokes, and tell me she loved me. I was paying her to be the perfect girlfriend I'd never actually had in real life. The most painful realization was that I'd known, on some level, that it wasn't completely real. The doubt had been there from early on: the missed calls, the inconsistent stories, the too professional receipts, the careful distance during my Manila visit. My gut had been telling me something was wrong for months. But I'd silenced those warnings because the alternative was going back to being alone and unimportant and purposeless. I'd chosen the beautiful lie over the ugly truth because the lie had made me feel better about myself. And in doing so, I'd become exactly the kind of man I'd never thought I could be: gullible, desperate, and pathetic. The kind of man who fell for obvious scams because he needed to believe someone could love him. The kind of man who mistook financial dependency for emotional connection. The kind of man who confused being used with being useful. Sitting there on that rainy October morning, looking at myself in the metaphorical mirror I'd been avoiding for months, I finally understood what had really happened. Kalina hadn't stolen my money. I'd given it to her. She hadn't tricked me into loving her. I'd chosen to love a fiction because the fiction was more appealing than my reality. She hadn't broken my heart. I'd handed it to her and asked her to validate it, knowing deep down that the validation was purchased rather than earned. That was the hardest truth of all. I'd been as dishonest with myself as she'd been with me. The only difference was that her dishonesty had been intentional and profitable, while mine had been unconscious and costly. But we'd both been playing roles, both been pretending, both been avoiding uncomfortable truths about who we really were and what we really wanted from each other. I moved to a small village in Andalusia in November, 8 months after Miguel's message shattered my last illusions about Kalina. Not because I was running away from what had happened, but because I was finally ready to build something real for myself. The kind of life that didn't depend on anyone else's validation or attention or affection. The kind of life that couldn't be destroyed by discovering that someone had been lying to me, because it was built on truths I could verify for myself. The house I rented was simple: 2 bedrooms, A small kitchen, a garden where the previous tenant had planted olive trees and rosemary bushes. Nothing like the suburban fantasies I'd shared with Kalina about houses with gardens where she could grow vegetables like her mother. This was just for me. A place where I could wake up each morning without wondering if today would bring another crisis requiring money, another inconsistent story requiring explanation, another performance requiring my suspended disbelief. I don't date. People ask me about that sometimes. Neighbors in the village, other British expats who've retired to southern Spain, the woman who runs the local grocery store and seems concerned about my solitary existence. No girlfriend, Graham? Handsome man like you? I just smile and change the subject. The truth is too complicated for casual conversation. How do you explain that you've lost the ability to trust your own judgment about people? How do you tell someone that you've learned to prefer your own company because it's the only company you can trust completely? It's not that I've sworn off human connection entirely. I have friends here, other retirees dealing with their own versions of starting over, locals who've accepted my broken Spanish and my tendency to buy too many groceries, neighbors who wave when I'm working in my garden. But these are daytime friendships, surface-level connections based on shared activities rather than emotional intimacy. I help Maria next door carry her shopping up the hill. Jose across the street brings me oranges from his tree. We have conversations about weather and politics and the price of gasoline, and nobody expects me to share my feelings or my bank account details. I joined a support group, if you can call it that. It's just 5 men who meet every Thursday evening at a bar in the next village over. 3 of us got taken by Filipino women, 1 by a Romanian woman he met on a dating site, 1 by a Thai woman he married and brought to England before she cleaned out his savings and disappeared. We don't call it a support group, we call it Thursday drinks, but that's what it is. A place where we can talk about what happened to us without judgment or advice, or people telling us we should have known better. The thing is, said Peter one evening, it's not really about the money, is it? I mean, it is about the money, but it's also about feeling like a complete fool. About realizing you were living in a fantasy and everyone else could probably see it except you. He'd lost £38,000 to a woman who claimed to be a nurse in Bucharest, but turned out to be married, with 3 children. I keep thinking about all the times I told my daughter about Elena, about our plans to travel together when she got her visa sorted. My daughter's 25, same age as Elena supposedly was. She must have known it was bollocks, but she was too polite to say anything. That's the part that hurts most, not the money, but the humiliation. The knowledge that I was so obviously desperate, so clearly vulnerable, so transparently lonely that I made an easy target. The awareness that friends and family probably saw what was happening but didn't know how to warn me without destroying what little happiness I seemed to have found. The realization that I'd become the kind of person other people worried about, pitied, whispered about behind my back. You can't blame yourself for wanting connection, our group facilitator tells us. She's a social worker who volunteers her time because she's seen too many older men fall for these scams. Loneliness is a real human need. These women are professionals, they study psychology, they know exactly which emotional buttons to push. You weren't stupid, you were human. I appreciate what she's trying to do, but it doesn't change the fundamental facts. Smart people don't send £42,000 to strangers based on video calls and sob stories. Emotionally healthy people don't mistake financial dependency for love. Self-aware people don't ignore red flags for 8 months because they prefer the fantasy to the reality. I've stopped trying to get answers from Kalina. Not because I've forgiven her, I don't think I'll ever forgive someone who could fake intimacy so convincingly, but because I finally understand that her answers wouldn't help me anyway. Whether she felt any genuine affection for me, whether she ever thought about our conversations after logging off, whether she felt any guilt about taking my money, none of that changes what happened or how I need to move forward. The truth is that Kalina could call me tomorrow with a complete explanation and apology, and it wouldn't fix the damage that's been done. Not the financial damage that's just money, and I'll survive without it, but the damage to my ability to trust myself, to believe in my own judgment about people, to feel confident that I can distinguish between genuine affection and skilled manipulation. That damage is something I have to repair myself, slowly and carefully, without any help from the person who caused it. Some mornings I wake up angry, not just at her, but at myself, at the whole situation, at the loneliness that made me so desperate for connection that I ignored obvious warning signs. Those are the days when I work in the garden until my hands are sore, when I walk for miles through the olive groves until my legs ache, when I clean my house from top to bottom just to tire myself out enough to sleep. Anger is exhausting, but it's better than the alternative feelings, the self-pity, the regret, the wondering about what might have been if I'd been smarter or less lonely or more skeptical. Other mornings I wake up grateful to be free from the constant worry about her next crisis, her next emergency, her next need for money. Grateful to live somewhere quiet, where my phone doesn't buzz with messages requiring immediate financial responses. Grateful to have learned something important about myself, even if the lesson was expensive and humiliating. Grateful to be building a life that belongs entirely to me, that can't be disrupted by discovering that someone I love has been lying to me for months. I sleep better now than I have in years. Not because I'm happy, I'm not sure I know what happiness looks like anymore, but because I'm at peace with my circumstances. I know exactly where I stand financially, emotionally, socially. I know what I have and what I don't have, what I can control and what I can't. There are no mysteries in my life, no unanswered questions, no situations that require me to trust anyone else's version of reality over my own observations. The house is quiet in the evenings, but it's a different kind of quiet than the flat in London was. This is chosen solitude rather than imposed loneliness. This is the peace of not waiting for someone to call, not wondering if today will bring good news or bad news, not constantly managing someone else's emotional and financial crises from 8,000 miles away. This is the calm that comes from accepting that you are enough, by yourself, even if you're not everything you once hoped to be. I matter now because I choose to matter to myself, not because someone else has made me feel important. I'm building something real here, not a fantasy relationship based on video calls and money transfers, but an actual life with actual neighbors and actual responsibilities and actual satisfactions. It's smaller than the dreams I shared with Kalina, less dramatic than the romance I thought I'd found, quieter than the future I'd imagined. But it's mine, completely and honestly mine, and that makes it worth more than any fantasy ever could be. I don't need a reply from her to close this chapter. I don't need an apology or an explanation or acknowledgement that what she did was wrong. I don't need her forgiveness for being naive enough to believe her, and I don't need to forgive her for lying to me. What I need is to keep building this new life, one day at a time, one small truth at a time, until the person I am now is stronger than the person I was when I fell for her lies. The story ends here, not with answers or closure or justice, but with acceptance. Acceptance that some people are capable of extraordinary cruelty disguised as love. Acceptance that loneliness can make intelligent people do foolish things. Acceptance that trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild, and that it's okay to take that time. Acceptance that being alone is not the same as being lonely, and that building a life by yourself is not a consolation prize but a legitimate choice. I sent her $42,000 because I believed we were building a life together. She was already married, and I wasn't even the only one sending money. That's the part nobody warns you about, not the money you lose, but the person you discover you become when you're desperate enough to ignore every warning sign in pursuit of feeling loved. But that person is gone now, replaced by someone who knows the difference between solitude and loneliness, between generosity and desperation, between love and the performance of love. Someone who has learned that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with yourself, and that relationship is worth protecting at any cost.